Disclaimer: this story contains mature themes intended for adult viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. The house was quiet, too quiet, when I stepped into the living room, stretching my arms over my head to ease the ache in my back. The loose gown slid softly against my skin, warm from the shower, the fabric parting just enough as I lifted my arms. I didn't think anyone was around. I didn't think anyone would see. Until I heard footsteps. He entered the room with a distracted look, murmuring something about looking for his charger, until his eyes lifted and stopped. Completely. The half-sentence died on his lips. His gaze locked on me with a stunned stillness that froze the air between us. And he didn't even try to hide it. A slow, unguarded stare. One that traveled, hesitating, returning, like he couldn't decide where to look first. My pulse kicked instantly, thudding loud in my chest, and suddenly every inch of skin under the gown felt exposed, too warm, too aware. I lowered my arms, but it was too late. The moment had already stretched longer than it should have. "Didn't hear you come in," I whispered, pretending to rearrange the edge of the gown, even though my fingers trembled just enough to betray me. "I didn't want to interrupt," he said, voice low, caught somewhere between guilty and breathless. But he didn't move. Not back. Not away. He stayed exactly where he was, leaning slightly toward me, like his body made a choice his mind hadn't caught up to yet. A charged silence settled between us, warm and dangerous. He took a step closer. Just one. Close enough that I felt the air shift with him. Close enough that my heartbeat became impossible to ignore. "You sure?" I asked, meaning something else entirely. His eyes flicked to mine, holding longer than they ever had before. And something in that look, something unspoken, something bold, made my breath catch. Before either of us could say another word, he reached for the back of the couch, but his fingers brushed mine instead. Light. Accidental. But it shook right through me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us apologized. And in that tiny touch, everything changed, more than either of us were ready to admit. Then he leaned in just a little, as if he was about to say something he shouldn't. But he didn't. Because right then, someone else walked down the hallway. The moment in the living room lingered between us long after he stepped back and pretended nothing happened. The hallway light flicked on, someone passed by without noticing the tension cracking in the air, and everything quietly reset. But I didn't. Because the way he looked at me, like he saw something he wasn't supposed to, something he'd been trying not to think about, left an ache blooming inside my chest. Not guilt. Not fear. Something else. Something I had been ignoring for far too long. I went to the kitchen, pretending to tidy the counter even though my thoughts were tangled. I could still feel the warmth where his fingers brushed mine. Too light to be called a touch, too intentional to be called accidental. We'd always lived in this strange space between closeness and distance, like we were orbiting around the same center but never daring to cross the line. He'd always been attentive in ways that made me pause, lingering glances, quiet concern, the way he noticed when my mood shifted before I said a word. But lately, something in him had changed. A stillness, a hidden heaviness behind his smile. And now, after what just happened, I couldn't pretend anymore. He walked into the kitchen, moving slower than usual, avoiding my eyes like he wasn't sure if he had permission to look at me again. That alone told me more about his feelings than anything he'd ever said out loud. "You okay?" he asked, choosing a safe question even though everything between us was anything but safe. "I'm fine," I said, but my voice wavered. "Just thinking." He leaned against the counter near me, his shoulder close enough that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from him. A quiet, unspoken closeness. Neither of us stepped away. We stayed like that for a moment, close, but not touching, both pretending to look at anything but each other. The kitchen hummed with the quiet sounds of the fridge and the ticking clock, but underneath all that was a tension so thick it changed the air itself. "There's been a lot on your mind lately," he said, his tone careful, gentle. "I notice things." I looked at him then. Really looked. "You always do." His jaw tightened, and for a split second, something raw flashed through his eyes, fondness, worry, something deeper that he quickly masked. He dropped his gaze, but not before I caught it. And then, there it was again. That pull. That invisible gravity drawing us closer, making even our silence feel intimate. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said quietly. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. "I'm not pretending," I whispered, too honest, too vulnerable. His eyes lifted, slow and deliberate, locking onto mine with a heat that made my heart pound. Just when the room felt too small for everything unsaid between us, his phone vibrated on the counter. A name flashed across the screen, one I didn't expect. His expression changed instantly, and I felt something inside me shift, because whatever that call was, I knew it was about to complicate everything. The name flashing on his phone shouldn't have bothered me, but it did. A sharp, unexpected twist of emotion pulsed through my chest before I could stop it. The soft kitchen light reflected off the screen, illuminating the name of the girl he'd been spending time with lately. Younger. Flirtier. Always around. He didn't answer. He just stared at it, then slowly turned the phone face down. Something unspoken passed between us, thick, warm, and dangerous. "You're not going to pick up?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but the words came out tighter than I intended. He exhaled softly. "Not right now." My heart kicked. Not right now? Because of me? He didn't step back. If anything, he leaned in closer, his shoulder brushing mine just enough to send a tremor up my spine. "You don't like her," he murmured. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." His voice was low, almost challenging. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, annoyance, confusion, jealousy, all tangled into one. "I just think you could do better," I said, folding my arms, though it did nothing to shield the pounding in my chest. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying me with a focus that made it hard to breathe. "Better? Or different?" I swallowed. Hard. This was the first time he'd pushed. The first time he didn't hide the edge in his voice, the quiet longing he tried so hard to keep buried. "You're acting like you care," he said softly, taking one slow step toward me. The counter pressed against my back. He was close enough that I felt the faint warmth of his breath. "Maybe I do," I whispered before I could stop myself. His jaw tensed. His eyes dropped to my lips for the briefest second, so fast I almost doubted it, so charged I couldn't forget it. "You shouldn't," he said, voice rough. "But I'm not sure I want you to stop." The air tightened, heavy with something neither of us dared name. All the tension, all the glances, all the unspoken feelings were suddenly right there between us, undeniable. Just when he leaned in closer, the phone vibrated again, louder this time. The same name. The same interruption. He closed his eyes, frustrated. Torn. And I realized this moment was going to change everything. The second his phone stopped vibrating, the silence hit harder than any sound could. He exhaled, slow and unsteady, and for a moment I thought he might step back, choose the safe path, pull the walls up again. But he didn't. Instead, he reached past me to place the phone farther away on the counter, and his arm brushed along my waist. Not accidental. Not this time. My breath caught. "We shouldn't be standing this close," I whispered. "Then tell me to move," he murmured. I didn't. Couldn't. The kitchen felt too small for the heat building between us. Every inch of space around us seemed charged, humming with something that had been growing for far too long. I felt his heartbeat, or maybe it was mine, sinking with the tension tightening the air. He looked at me like he was fighting a war inside his chest. Like he'd already lost. "I tried to stay away," he said, voice raw. "But every time I look at you." He stopped himself, jaw tightening. That alone made my pulse jump. "Say it," I whispered. His eyes met mine, dark and unguarded. "I can't pretend anymore." The words hit me like a shock. The room suddenly felt warmer, my skin hypersensitive, every emotion amplified. We weren't supposed to cross this line, but we were already standing on it, barely breathing. "Someone could walk in," I said, though my body leaned toward him instead of away. "No one's home," he replied quietly. The implications wrapped around us like a dare. He took one step closer, slow, deliberate, closing the distance until I could feel the warmth of his body just inches away. His gaze flicked down for half a second, then back to my eyes, like he was silently asking a question he was terrified to say out loud. My hand brushed his, not enough to hold, not enough to break the rules. just enough to destroy any last bit of distance we had left. He inhaled sharply, eyes locked onto mine. "I shouldn't want this," he said. "But you do," I breathed. His throat bobbed, and he leaned in, close enough that our foreheads almost touched, close enough that I could feel his breath, close enough that one more second would break every boundary we've ever held. And then, a knock echoed from the front door. Loud. Sudden. Too close. We froze. He pulled back just enough to stare at me, like he wasn't sure whether to answer the door or ignore it and keep going. "Don't move," he whispered. But the knocking came again. And this time, someone called his name. The knock at the door hit like a jolt of cold water, snapping the moment in half. His name echoed again from the hallway, firmer this time, familiar enough to make his shoulders tense instantly. He stepped back, but only a fraction, as if part of him refused to give up the closeness we'd just shared. His eyes searched mine, conflicted, breath unsteady. "I have to answer," he whispered, guilt threading through every word. I nodded, even though my heart hammered painfully. He took one last lingering look at me, one that said everything he was afraid to speak, before walking toward the living room. I stayed in the kitchen, trying to calm the trembling in my hands. Then I heard the door open. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low, guarded. A woman's voice answered. Her. The girl whose name had flashed across his phone. "I've been calling you," she said sharply. "You didn't pick up. So I came." I felt the sting of jealousy fast and deep, but it wasn't jealousy alone. It was fear. Fear that whatever had just happened between us could vanish the moment another person stepped into the room. I moved quietly toward the edge of the hallway, staying just out of sight. "You weren't supposed to come over," he said. "Why? Who's here?" Her tone shifted, suspicious, demanding. Before he could answer, she stepped farther inside and saw me. Her eyes widened, not with innocence, but with the unmistakable recognition of something she was never meant to witness. She looked from me to him, and the meaning clicked instantly. "Oh," she breathed. "So that's why you didn't answer." He froze. I froze. The truth hung in the air even though nothing had happened. Not really. Not yet. "That's not," he tried to explain, but she cut him off. "It is," she snapped. "You've been different for weeks. Distant." "I thought it was something I did." She laughed bitterly. "Turns out it was someone else." I stepped forward. "It's not what you think." She looked me dead in the eyes. "Then tell me what it is." Silence. Heavy. Devastating. Because the truth, that pull between us, the moment inches from happening, was written all over our faces. She shook her head slowly, disappointment sinking into her features. "I knew it. I knew something was off. I should have trusted my instincts." He rubbed his forehead, voice cracking. "I didn't want you finding out like this." "Finding out what?" she demanded. "That you're in love with her?" Everything stopped. He inhaled sharply, caught off guard, cornered by a truth he had never spoken aloud. And then, he didn't deny it. Not a word. He just looked at me raw, exposed, terrified, and the world felt like it tilted under my feet. "You need to tell her," she whispered, eyes softening with a strange mix of pain and resignation. "Tell her the truth." He swallowed hard, turned toward me, and took a step closer. "I think you already know," he said. My breath caught. Because yes, somewhere deep down I did. And now there was no going back. The doorway felt like a fault line. One step forward and everything would crack open. One step back and everything we felt would bury itself again. He stood between us, shoulders tight, breathing uneven, the weight of every unspoken truth finally pressing down. The younger woman crossed her arms, her voice trembling. "Just say it. Say you want her." He closed his eyes as if steadying himself. "It's not that simple." "It is," she snapped. "I cared about you. I tried to understand you. But you kept drifting somewhere else, toward her." Her words burned, even though I hadn't asked him for anything. Hadn't encouraged anything. But the tension, the glances, the almost confessions, we both knew this moment was inevitable. "I never meant to hurt you," he said softly. "But you did," she whispered back. The pain in her voice made something inside me twist. I stepped forward. Whatever you think this is, it wasn't planned. There was no intention to replace you or mislead you. She met my gaze, eyes shining not with anger, but with disappointment. I know you didn't plan it. People don't plan things like this. They just happen. And when they do, someone always gets hurt. Silence fell again. Heavy. Unavoidable. I'm sorry, he said, voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. I didn't want you to find out like this. She took a shaky breath and lifted her chin. I just want honesty. He looked at me then, directly, fully, as if the entire room fell away. I feel something for her, he confessed. Something I can't ignore anymore. My heart jumped in my chest, painful and impossible. She inhaled sharply, but she didn't interrupt. I tried to push it away, he continued. Tried to pretend it wasn't happening. But tonight, I finally realized I've been lying to myself. The honesty in his voice sent a warmth through me and a pang of guilt all at once. She stepped back, eyes glistening. Thank you for at least giving me the truth. She turned toward the door, hesitating only once before leaving. Take care of each other, she said quietly. Or don't, but don't pretend anymore. When the door clicked shut, the house felt impossibly still. He turned to me, face pale, eyes soft, but heavy with everything that had just unfolded. I didn't mean for this to explode like that, he said. I know, I whispered. But it had to come out eventually. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing once before stopping just inches from me. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of relieving, but of what this means now. For us. I swallowed, heart pounding. And what do you want it to mean? He looked at me raw, exhausted, but undeniably drawn in. I want a chance, he said. A chance to be honest with you. And with myself. His voice trembled. If you'll let me. The room throbbed with tension, relief, and something deeper, something finally free. But the true ending, the real decision, still hung between us, waiting. The house felt different once the door closed behind her. Quieter. Softer. As if the chaos had drained out and left only the echo of what mattered. He stood there in the middle of the living room, breathing like he'd just run a marathon. I watched him, watched the way his shoulders dropped, the way the tension slowly melted from his face, leaving something vulnerable in its place. Are you okay? I asked gently. He shook his head. No, not really. But I think this is the first time I've been honest with myself in a long time. I stepped closer, slow, careful. Not to force anything, but to close the distance that had been pulling at both of us for weeks. You didn't have to say any of that, I whispered. I did, he said. Because every time I walked into a room and saw you, I felt like I was choosing between what was easy and what was real. My heart fluttered, unsteady. And what's real? He moved closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him again, the quiet gravity that had been slowly reeling us in. You, he said softly. It's always been you. The words landed like a warm shock. Gentle. Certain. True. I looked into his eyes and saw everything he'd been hiding: fear, desire, tenderness, regret, hope. All tangled into one. You're sure? I whispered, even though a part of me already knew the answer. He nodded. I don't want to keep pretending. Not with you. His voice cracked on the last word, and something inside me broke open. I reached for his hand, hesitant, almost shy, and when our fingers touched, he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. He held my hand tighter, pulling me gently toward him. Not in a rushed way. Not bold or reckless. Just honest. A closeness that felt earned. I'm scared, he whispered again. But if you're willing, I want to try. Really try. I stepped into his arms, letting my forehead rest against his chest. He wrapped his arms around me, slow, unsure, but full of every feeling he couldn't say out loud. His heartbeat was frantic, matching my own. You don't have to be scared, I murmured. We'll figure it out. He tilted my chin up with trembling fingers, searching my eyes for permission he already had. Can I? He breathed. I nodded. He kissed my forehead, gentle, lingering, full of gratitude and relief and something slow-burning that promised everything would be different now. He held me closer, his voice barely audible. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time all night, the house felt warm again. Safe. like the beginning of something neither of us had planned, but both of us were ready for. And as we held each other in the quiet glow of the living room, the tension finally shifted into something softer, something deep, real, and undeniably ours. A new beginning.